Hi everyone, this is Alex Gossi, owner of Magically Resin and brand ambassador for Craft Resin. I would like to do a demonstration for you today showing you how I made this piece and how, in particular, how I bent this piece. And the reason why I chose this piece is because it is a pivotal piece in my business and how I built my business. And part of my whole strategy for how I got my business up and going was bending resin, and I was one of the only people doing it. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is turning your resin hobby into a business, and I'm going to use this example to give you ideas, and I'll also do a demonstration as to how I made this beautiful piece. First of all, I think it is very important to take just a few designs that your customers rave about, keep things very small, simple, and organized. You don't want to be overwhelmed, and you might not have a lot of space. So build on small successes, build up your following, and really listen to your following and see what resonates with them. The second thing that I think is incredibly important is crafting a consistently good product. We live in a world where one bad review is really detrimental to all of the work that you're putting into what you're doing. So practicing the same product that you'll be selling to your customers, use it in your house. That is so vital to knowing that you are delivering a good product and that it can handle the shipment. So that is something to consider as well. If you're selling locally, that's different, but if you're having to ship it, temperature is a factor, and the rigors of shipping are a factor. So producing a consistently good product is vital, and I find using craft resin makes this so much easier. I know that every time I ship something that I made with craft resin, that it's going to be great. What you see here is craft resin part A and B mixed equally, or measured equally, and then mixed and held in the glass for 7 minutes. I started with my craft resin at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty consistent for what I do. And I added some black acrylic paint. I used Arteza, but I don't think that it would matter. And I mixed it in just enough. I wanted it to be granulated. What I was looking for was a black on black marble effect. And then I added some black alcohol ink, and you'll see as it pours out that you can see the granulated effect that is the black on black marble that I was going for. And additionally, I added some gold pinata alcohol ink. I really like the way that this floats to the top, and I was looking for it to make a molten golden top look, but I didn't want it to cover it, so I didn't want it to swallow the black. I wanted it to be mostly black with molten pieces showing up here and there. And as I poured it, I realized I was super careful to make sure that I would be able to see the granulated black. So I wanted to absolutely make sure that I didn't oversaturate the black, which would have killed the whole effect that I was going for. So I noticed, though, as I poured, that this was far lighter than what I wanted. And what I wanted to do also was I planned on pulling very dark black spaces into lighter spaces because I wanted to give this the feel of a smoky quartz crystal. Without, obviously it's a very shallow mold, so I couldn't actually put my crystals in it or it would have distorted the whole thing. And as a side note, whenever you're pouring something that you plan on bending, if you're adding glass or stones to it, it could greatly affect how it bends, and it actually could make it crack and make it really problematic. So if you plan on really testing the boundaries of something and bending it, it is better not to add any solid masses to it, or you might find that you have all kinds of trouble when you get to the point of bending it. So I've added in more black, and I'm going to pull it through the granulated clear spaces. And you can't really see it yet, but the gold, when I touch this with heat, pinata gold is amazing, and it comes to the surface, but it very easily can take over your entire piece, especially a piece like this where there isn't a lot of surface area. That gold is gonna take over. So just like with the black being sparse with that, I was very sparse with the pinata as well to make sure that it didn't take over, but that it did create this molten effect. So I'm going back and adding some more for that same idea. I want to pull it through, and I want to deepen the color without having the black take over, because all of this work I would have done would have been for naught. If I just wanted to pour a black piece, well, I would have done that from the start. Oh, that's pretty. I love watching the alcohol ink spread out. That's the first time I've seen it from this angle. The last time I saw it, I was actually making it. Wow, that's lovely. So you start to see now that the gold against the black, the gold is really coming to the top. And when I feel confident that there isn't too much gold in it, I will add a little bit more here in a bit. So I'm very softly with the end of a wooden stick that's a long Q-tip, like they use in a hospital or whatever. I use these all the time because I like the Q-tip end and I like the wooden end. So that Q-tip is probably pretty crusty by now, with resin and paint and, what have you. But I find this to be a very effective method to pull very slight strands of color into clear. And I do this in a lot of my pieces, especially something so delicate as this one. So you'll notice often when you look at something that I've made that it has a stone or quartz feel to it, where there are striations of colors pulled into clear. And right this moment, I'm so in love with black and gold and clear. And then I'm using quartz crystals in lots of things that I make too. So if you look at, the things I'm producing right now, this color scheme is so common, but it'll shift. I love blue as well. Ocean colors. Often I will find, myself in a space where everything I make is blue. So I have out the Craft Resin and the resin hardener and the mica box, and I just absolutely love it. I use this mica powder all the time. It didn't turn out that I used it in this project because I had a specific idea of what I wanted, and that was not achieved with mica. But I use this box all the time, and I love the mica variety of colors and how immersive the color is, which is in fact why I didn't use it, because for this I wanted it to be like such a subtle light hand, and I also wanted it to be completely transparent. So I only used products that supported keeping it transparent. To our craft resin topic of the week, how to turn your resin hobby into a business. The thing that I think is the most important next is social media. I know there are lots of people that don't do social media, and I can only speak to my experience. So I can't, I don't have a group of people that, we take a poll and I know how everybody else did it. But how I did it was I found social media to be very vital, learning how to film, learning how to post, learning how to make friends on the internet in collaboration with people. And I found this to be my most valuable tool in getting my business up and running. And it did not happen overnight. So that brings me to my last and most important thing that I believe is be patient with yourself and be kind to yourself. You're in a time of significant change and under pressure, and you're learning skills. And this does not matter what age you are or what else you have going on. This is a trying space, and it's difficult for anybody in your world to really understand what you're going through. At least I found it to be. So be really patient with yourself, and give yourself a cheer for those wins and be proud of the accomplishments that you make, and recognize that this takes time, and that if you're having fun with it and you're moving forward, you're doing great. So what you see here is the base mold. This is a mold that I poured myself. So as you've seen some of my personal molds before, they're not for sale. It's not a professional thing. So they're kind of a mess. But they make beautiful pieces, which is really all I care about in this respect. So I had poured some resin into this. It's a rather tall base mold, and I'd poured some resin into it so that the resin wouldn't flash cure. And I did all of the same things to that resin in the pillar mold that I did in the flat mold. But because it's a pillar, you couldn't really see what I was doing anyway, so I didn't think that was particularly vital, and it was just reiterating the same thing. And then I went ahead and I added some more resin because I felt that the resin in the cup was getting really hot. So I wanted to make sure and get it out of the cup before it flash cured, because that is the danger of the way I do things. I start out with it really warm, and then I let it get up to, I start out with it 95 before I even mix the A and B, and then I let it get up to 110, both of those are Fahrenheit, before I pour anything. And I find for me that this is the perfect temperature to start doing what I'm going to do based on how much resin is in my cup and my consistency. I pour every day, so I've poured hundreds of pours this way, and I know what works for me. But it's really important for you to discover what works for you, what temperatures work for you. You'll see my temperature gun to the right of the screen. I use it constantly. I always want to know what temperature the resin is at to make sure it's warm enough before I start, and to make sure it doesn't flash cure as I'm getting going. So this pillar is tall and thin, so it is an ideal place for me to pour extra resin and not have it flash cure. I typically like to have a tall, thin, separate mold to do that. So these are quartz crystals. I love to embed quartz crystals in these pillar molds and in my bases. I feel like they produce an absolutely gorgeous stone effect with the warmth of the feeling of stone, but the shininess of resin, and I just love that. And so you'll see me putting crystals in lots of things that I do, and I buy these in bulk, and so I don't have a link for them. But I know that you can get unturned quartz crystals on Amazon, along with a wide variety of other crystals. I like to make sure that everything gets down in the resin and that there's no bubbles. This is also why I choose when I embed things in the resin. I still want it to be very low viscosity whenever I'm embedding something, that I want A, to sink, and B, the bubbles to come to the top. So I make sure and help that process along. And this is the Pinata Gold. I get it in a large container, so I transfer it over into a smaller container because I use a lot of this Pinata Gold. So I gave this pinata a bunch of time for all the gold to come to the surface for me to be able to know how much it was going to need so that I could enhance it without overrunning it. And I wasn't concerned with it about the pillar because it doesn't actually, most of it is going to sit on top and it's not really going to sink. Some of it will though, and I really like that effect. So the pinata on the pillar was mostly because I needed to pop the bubbles, and I was going to use some kind of alcohol anyway, and it was right there. So my expectation on the pillar is that most of the gold is going to be actually on the bottom of the pillar because it floats. But it did the job, and it popped all the bubbles, and it made the bottom really, really pretty while I was filming this video. So now you can see the striations that I was going for, And I think that turned out so great. If you wanted to add acrylic paint and you wanted it to be consistent and you didn't want striations, all you have to do is make sure and mix it better and incorporate it better. I didn't want it to incorporate. I wanted it to leave little pieces of black in the clear. And so it did exactly what I wanted it to do. But if you wanted it to mix better, just mix it for longer and then give it time to settle before you pour it, in case you've introduced bubbles that you don't want to be there. But you have a really long working time with craft resin, so it is very easy to add mica powder or add whatever you want to mix in, and then give it time to rest after that before you pour it. I just adore the sparkle from these little gems, and I did get these from Amazon, and I will put the link in the description below. I also transfer these into a much easier delivery system. I'm all about smart delivery systems when you're pouring resin. So this is actually the holder from hot foil. And I use a lot of hot foil for all kinds of things. I also do paper crafting and stuff. So I keep these because I think it is the most amazing receptacle for heavy glitter. And I have a container where they all just hang, and I pull off which one I need to use, like this one. And I know you can see like a little bit of sparkle here and there. These are so sparkly. They are very, very silvery and like smaller than nuggets. They're like chips, like little glass chips, except they look like metal. I think they actually are metal. They're probably aluminum. I don't know. They're wonderful though. So now I'm doing the same thing that I did with the quartz crystals. I want to get them just under the surface, but I actually don't want these to fall down too far. So I waited till the resin was very thick because I want these to be at the bottom of the pillar, and I want them to just show through the translucent, transparent black. I also wanted them to push down the gold just a little bit so that the bottom of the pillar, when you demold this and turn it over, you would see these crystal pieces and you would see some gold striations. And you'll see in the video at the end of this where I showed this piece that it absolutely did accomplish that. And it's, wow, it's so lovely. I know y'all must think I'm so silly that I just adore resin so much, and these pieces that are so amazing. It's the name of my company is Magically Resin because it is magic how things turn out. Now, I do have a fair bit of skill after all these years, so it's very purposeful the way things turn out, but there's a fair bit of magic there, and I just love it. That is an amazing part of this craft. So now I'm very, very carefully, I don't want these to go down too far, but I also don't want there to be any bubbles. And if it happens to have just one or two pieces sitting at the bottom, I want that base to be very pristine. Because more than likely I will sell this piece. So I want it to be in really good shape. Now comes the part that I think is the best. The heat gun added to the gold just brings it to life, and I think this is so fun. So using the heat gun to get rid of the bubbles, which is, super useful, but watching the way that it turns the gold alcohol ink into a molten top layer visual it's truly just breathtaking for me. I love the way that this works. So I can't get enough of watching the heat gun bring that gold to the top and really just make it amazing. And I like to use little spritzes of alcohol here and there whenever I'm doing anything with alcohol ink, which is fairly common. And I noticed that the center on my piece, that enough of the silver pieces had sunk in that it didn't have the very vibrant, bright, sparkly effect that I wanted. So I went ahead and added some more silver pieces to really make sure that that center is sparkly. And as it turned out, it is very sparkly. I love it. Well, it turns out that I forgot to turn on the camera while I was demolding this piece when it was still very soft. So this is a space where I have to be soft with myself because I messed up. And it happens. So I demolded this while it was still very soft. I had to wear gloves so I didn't get fingerprints in it. The timing for this demold will be different depending on what resin you're using, what temperature your resin was when you started, what temperature your resin is in the room. So I can't give you a time, but it's when your resin is cured enough to remove it without it sticking to the silicone, but uncured enough to be soft enough to bend. So I placed it in a container that was rigid enough to hold the sides, and I put a bottle of hairspray on top of it to hold it down after I got it centered. I did not have to use any heat here, but if your piece is a little more cured, just a little more cured than you'd like it to be, you can add heat to it to get it to push down into the bowl that you want to put it in, and then something heavy to weigh it down. So this was the final piece, and I'm thrilled. What you hear in the background is my dogs playing. I'm very sorry for that. I thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that I've given you some tips and some ideas that you find useful in turning your resin hobby into a business. And I really want to empower you to be able to move forward without you feeling the pressure of having to be perfect, because that pressure can be so crushing. And I've been right where you are, trying to get things started, feeling the need for everything to be right, so much stuff that you don't know, and you are the most important part of this process. Love yourself, take care of yourself, enjoy your art, and grow. It will happen. Just be patient, loving, and kind with yourself.